All right. Thank you all for joining us this evening, both folks from the Ministerium, as well as those of you who are here in person and those who are joining us online. For the folks who are online, I may keep you muted during the presentation just so we don't get too much background noise. But if you have any questions, you can put them in the chat. You can also unmute yourself to ask those questions. I think we'll have several breaks during the event for people to ask questions. So with that said, I will hand things off to David Morse.
All right, good evening and welcome to this panel discussion sponsored by the Monroeville Interfaith Ministerium and the Monroeville Public Library. My name is David Morse. I'm a retired United Methodist clergy person and a member of the Monroeville Interfaith Ministerium. I also want to acknowledge and thank my counterpart from the library, Mr. Corey Little, who is managing the Zoom link and will be fielding questions from our remote audience. Our topic this evening is the question, is religion relevant? We will proceed to address this question in three phases. First, each member of the panel, after introducing herself or himself and identifying his or her religious tradition, will have, give or take, 5 minutes to address the question. Following these presentations, we will have at no more than 15 minutes of discussion among the members of the panel. They will have an opportunity to ask each other questions, make further comments, and raise any other issues that any one of them may think is significant. As I said, we will limit that to 15 minutes. Finally, we will open the floor to the audience, both in the room and those who are joining us by Zoom. And as we did in our last panel, we will begin with questions from those in the room and alternate one at a time from the room and from the Zoom panel. We anticipate ending right around 8:30 p.m. Once again, my thanks to the panel, to those of you gathered here in person and on Zoom, and all who have made this possible. I would just say one other thing. I don't think as I look around I need to say it, but I will anyway. We in the Monroeville Interfaith Ministerium are committed not only to religious toleration, but religious affirmation and inclusion. And we celebrate all of the various religious traditions in the greater Monroeville area. You are free to disagree with anything anyone says, but we ask that you do so in a manner that is not only respectful to the persons, but respectful to the religious tradition as well. And we thank you in advance for that. Without further ado, Deacon Kelly, will begin with you and just move around, sing, representing the Sikh tradition, and our panelists will address the topic.
Good evening, I'm Deacon Mike Kelly. I'm from Christ the Divine Shepherd Catholic Parish, which is the merger of St. Bernadette's, North American Memorial, St. Michael's, St. Bartholomew, St. Susanna's, and St. Gerard Magellan. So we now cover all of Monroeville, Penn Hills, and Pitcairn. And I have been ordained, will be 25 years in June. So the subject is really looking at two questions. What is religion, and is it relevant? And to a certain degree, religion is what gives form to our lives. It's kind of what, for a person who adheres to religion, it's what gives their life purpose. I hear a lot of people talk about, well, I'm spiritual, but I don't really go in for religion. A friend of mine once presented a really interesting analogy, and I think it speaks volumes. If you think about water as spirituality, unless you have a container for the water, religion, there's no control over what happens. You pour the water onto the table, it goes everywhere. So just that as a framework, religion is kind of the way we see the world. Now, relevance. Over time, humankind has developed. And there have been 4 major areas, at least in the European view of the world, that have kind of affected this. The first really was the Reformation. the Reformation, the question was raised, is it necessary to have a single church? And then it went from there to the Enlightenment, where some of the founding fathers of our country we are talked about as Christian, but they were not, they were deists. Because under the Enlightenment, the question was raised, is Jesus necessary? Then we enter into the modern time with people like Friedrich Nietzsche, who begins to ask the question, is God even necessary, or is there a God? And now we're in the postmodern environment where we see the question more being raised, what is truth? Is there truth, or there is no truth? What I believe is true. Now, we could delve into a lot of different sociological issues here. I just saw a study literally today that said that, at least in the Christian background, 80% of the people who sit in the pews are from families that had both parents as they were growing up. But it also showed that the decline in, well, say Catholic was about 20% decline over the last several years of participation. Protestant, I think, was around 12%. What was interesting in that same thing was that it spoke of Judaism as increasing participation by 7% and Islam by about 4% in that same study. So the question becomes, what is important to people? And when we're talking about presenting a message, the world today wants a presentation. They're not worried about the content. What's important to them is how is it presented. And if it's presented in a way that engages them, then that's great. But the problem with that logic is that presentation leads to infatuation. Content is what leads to passion. And that's where, in many times, we're missing. And I think generally, we will all say that much of our, many of our houses of worship are lacking younger people who just aren't engaging because they're finding other things to do, they're finding other interests. There's so many influences in the world that it is very difficult to try to draw people in. We believe we have a message that is important to people. And that's why we continue to do what we do, even when sometimes it feels like we're beating our head against the wall. But we believe that religion is relevant and helps people. Our challenge is trying to convince people of the same.
Good evening. My name is Laura Berman. I'm the cantor and the spiritual leader of Parkway Jewish Center as of the beginning of this calendar year. And so this is my first such panel. Being the spiritual leader at Parkway Jewish Center, I will speak about the Jewish, as much as I can speak about one perspective, because Judaism doesn't just have one perspective. I will speak about a Jewish perspective on the relevance of religion. And in so doing, I want to start with a Talmudic tale. And there's a Talmudic tale about a sage that lived around the 1st century named Hillel. The stranger comes up to Hillel and says, "Teach me the Torah while I stand on one foot." And Hillel says, "Okay," something like that. "That which is hateful to you, do not do to your fellow." But that's not all he says. He says, "The rest is commentary. Now go and learn." So a couple things that I wanted to bring out about that. The reason I started with that is because, just like Deacon Mike said, there can be a desire for some people to have a simplistic idea of what is religion about. And it's not so simplistic. The stranger was seeking some kind of an easy answer, but real wisdom comes with a lot of work. Jewish teaching, for example, goes back and back and back and is continually reinterpreted, and that's part of what we add to this long tradition. and so within the teachings and the wisdom comes a great deal of complexity and a great deal of even contradiction and tension and paradox. The great Jewish thinker and rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel said, polarity is at the heart of Judaism. So in other words, it's relevant also because it understands that life is not easy and questions in life are not easy, and it's not easy just to go look something up and find an answer, or how do I do this, and yet there is a desire for people to connect with something beyond themselves, and maybe to be the best of what we can be as humanity, or what is asked of us, and what do we leave behind. Judaism as first monotheistic religion starts with this idea of basic unity, that's basic unity is this essence that we call God, and in Jewish tradition, God has a lot of different names, and so a lot of different ways of being understood, and maybe different values, and maybe different lenses that might take us to one part of the essence. And this essence holds in our tradition a sense of commandedness. So that speaks to this question of what is our responsibility, right? Life, so if this essence is our creator, which we also understand in Judaism, then there is there's this not only this oneness, and then this ineffability, this ineffable and essence, that this commander is seeking something from us, and then we in turn may also hopefully are also seeking something of ourselves, something of what do we connect with, what does this world demand from us, and much of Jewish teaching speaks to all these kind of questions. What does our life, this gift of our life, this gift of the Creator, what does it demand of us? Because life is, yes, a gift in Jewish thought, but life is also a responsibility. And what are those responsibilities? And one of the most important teachings in Judaism, and right at the beginning of Genesis, is that each human being is created in the image of God. And I'm using God, and again, we may have other names for this oneness, or this eternal parent, if you will. But if we see one another as being created in the image of this entity, then we can recognize something in the other. That's not other, that's same, right? And then that from there flows so much else about how we treat one another, and that treating one another is not about what their status is, or how much money they're worth, or what they can do for us, but simply that they're another human being. Or we could go further, simply part of creation, right? Because it doesn't end with humanity. We're responsible for all of the world and all of the creation of the world, to be, if you will, the partner of that entity we might call God in taking care of the world. So how we treat ourselves, how we treat one another. There's also, and seeing ourselves as part of this divine human family. And ultimately working towards a sense of wholeness among all of humanity. Boy, I'm going very far from my notes, but so I'm getting into it. And then somebody might ask, well, if somebody with a scientific sensibility might say, well, science is the most important thing, but I think religion speaks to something that is about the sacred, not necessarily how does this come to be, or what are the pieces, or how is this made, or something of that sort, but what is the purpose? Why? What do we have to do? How do we care for that which is around us? How do we show our gratitude? How do we take in the sanctity of all of life? How do we maybe express our awe and express our appreciation and cherish all of creation? Now, from the Jewish lens, there is a system of laws, a covenantal system that's about preserving society, that if we internalize some of this commandedness, right? If we internalize that, boy, that makes things so much easier in society. Otherwise, we would have to police everything all the time, and that doesn't really work. Not that there shouldn't be a system of justice, of course, but again, it's a higher calling, perhaps, that we could speak to. My son just as we were coming out of COVID had celebrated becoming bar mitzvah, and I said, you know what? When you do a teaching, you can write about whatever you want, but some kind of Jewish subject. So the subject that he chose had to do with law, and the law of Torah, right, or Jewish law, compared to, let's say, American law, as he talked about. And it was a really interesting subject because, and from an eighth grader's point of view, right? So among the things he talked about was, and we had to do some research, but like during COVID, what does American law say about the need to wear a mask? Right? And we know there was a lot of hullabaloo about, I have a right not to wear a mask. But if you're looking through a religious lens, and a lens that speaks to life above almost everything, then it's easier to make choice, right? Then the sanctity of that life and the preservation of that life is going to come first and tell you, yes, I should wear a mask, from a religious lens, and that's different than an American legal lens. And I'm just speaking about American law, of course, at this point. Same thing with the idea of giving of charity, right? We don't have any kind of law about charity, but from a religious perspective, and that idea that we have responsibility for one another, then yes, we owe it to everything, right? We should be giving back. We should be giving to one another and helping all boats to rise, helping all of humanity to rise. And so that takes me to the issue of actions and deeds and going beyond. And so from a Jewish lens, with all the polarity and all the complexity, of course, there can be arguments and there can be, what about this? And all kinds of different viewpoints, right? And while we can argue about things, our actions, we're expected to have actions that are decent, righteous actions. Okay, so because we may differ in nuances of belief and ways we might approach different questions, but we still have this sense of responsibility towards the whole world, that repairing the world, even if we can't do it all, right? There's no expectation that we can do it all, but we have to do something. And that idea of reaching beyond the way things were when, the way things are now to what things could be, and always looking towards that hopefulness of the future, I think is in the essence, at least from a Jewish lens. So our participation in all of these sort of godly tasks, right? Again, using some common language, is a way of bringing wholeness to our expressions, to our world through our expressions of appreciation, through the way we honor one another, and shows a kind of love and partnership with this sense of the divine and with what the world could be. And so on one foot, or one chair, whatever, this is kind of how I see from a Jewish lens a relevance of religion and where it takes us in our world beyond laws and other constructs that our society has.
Good evening. My name is Harilal Patel, and I represent Hindu Jain temple here, basically for the Indian community in general. And when you talk about religion, we consider mother to be the first teacher. So whatever we are collectively for the rest of the life is essentially what mother has taught us in early age of it. And Hinduism particularly is not a so-called religion which defines or like Abrahamic religion. There is no beginning, there is no founder, and there are many things we can discuss some other time. Yeah. Now, the basic proper conduct like honesty, truthfulness, living in peace and harmony within your group of people, community, and also with everything made by Mother Nature makes a very humble if you're kind of a religious person to some degree. It also makes you law-abiding person. Hinduism really teaches the live and lately. That's why you see the non-violence is one of the key pillars in Hinduism. So you don't disturb anyone, it's either human being or animal or a bird or even ant. If they are doing that, you do yours. You live that way. You have to have compassion toward every living being. That includes everything, including plants and trees and those things. So modern day, when we talk about the environment and ecology, it is already actually built in your training right from the birth, that we shouldn't be pruning out the plant if it is not bothering you or not a problem for you. Now, there is other part of when we talk about religion, is the spirituality. Because we call soul is divine, it's contrary to some other religion beliefs. That we all are divine, and that divinity within you is what makes you right out of contact with other people. So you can always be respectful to others and be in peace and harmony with everything the Mother Nature has made in the world. Then there comes the issue about equality, which questions today sometimes, not knowing really what it is. They found on a caste or some other word like that. We consider every living life is equal. As I have a life, the dog has the same soul, or an ant has the same soul. So I should be respecting all of them in same order. However, just like a coin has a two sides, these are the good part of it. Other religion, particularly the Western religion, because the world has about more than 180 religions. I learned when I went to attend a seminar in Chicago. So, across this Western religion, they overbear it. And in order to increase their number, they do preach hatred. And so that's a part of it, and some people suffer from that quite a lot because of that. That's it. Thank you.
I'm Susan Spalding Burke, and I'm a member of the Baha'i faith. I'm not a clergy member. Our faith does not have clergy. We have an administrative order that administers our faith. So all Baha'is are expected to study and understand our sacred writings. So what I'm gonna talk about comes from my personal study and my understanding. There are people here, even in this room, who could do it much better than I can, but I'm gonna do my best. So, I also just want to mention that when I talk about God, I am gonna use I'm gonna use he. Our writings have he. It's not a matter of gender, it's a matter of language and translation. For one thing, we believe God is unknowable, so gender is kind of not a factor either. Language is a problem. So what is religion? From the Baha'i perspective, to describe religion, you really have to talk about God. God is, quote, unknowable, inaccessible, the source of all revelation, eternal, omniscient, omnipresent, and almighty, end quote. So we believe that God created humanity, he created the world, and he also entered into a covenant with the people of the world, telling them that he would never leave them without guidance. And because of that, we believe that he sends what we call messengers or manifestations of God. He sends them to earth to guide us. So we believe that all the religions were sent by God in a progressive nature to match the progress of humankind. The Buddha, Krishna, Muhammad, Abraham, Moses, Jesus were all sent to educate us. They are manifestations of God. They're great educators. The sacred writings sent by God through them has formed the religions that we mostly know, especially here in the West. We believe that Baha'u'llah, the manifestation for the Baha'i faith, is God's messenger for this day. His primary message is the elimination of all forms of prejudice and the unity of all peoples. So here are two quotes from Baha'u'llah about religion. So religion is, quote, the chief instrument for the establishment of order in the world and of tranquility amongst its people, end quote. And, quote, is not the object of every revelation to effect a transformation in the whole character of mankind, a transformation that shall itself, both outwardly and inwardly, that shall affect us, that shall affect both its inner and external life. Which I think so far all of my panelists have talked about the fact that religion is here to guide us. Abdul Baha, who is the son of Baha'u'llah, described religion this way. Religion, moreover, is not a series of beliefs, a set of customs. Religion is the teachings of the Lord God, teachings which constitute the very life of humankind, which urge high thoughts upon the mind, refine character, and lay the groundwork for man's everlasting honor, end quote. So those two quotations bring me to relevance. So the role of religion is to educate and train humankind for the betterment of the world. That's what it's there for. Again, Abdul Baha states, he also said these things about that, is that the divine religions must be the cause of oneness among men and the means for unity and love. They must promulgate universal peace, free man from every prejudice, bestow joy and gladness, and exercise kindness to all men, and do away with every difference and distinction. And also, and this is clear, a power above and beyond the power of nature must needs be brought to bear to change this black darkness into light, and these hatreds and resentments, grudges and spites, these endless wrangles and wars into fellowship and love amongst all the people of the earth. This power is none other than the breathings of the Holy Spirit and the mighty inflow of the Word of God. Therefore, religion, Baha'is believe, is relevant because humanity can only advance through the development, its development by following God's words. So I'd just like to close with one of my quotations I like to live by, and it says, "Love ye all religions and all races with a love that is true and sincere, and show that love through deeds and not through words." So, thank you.
My name is Lindsay White. I'm the pastor of Crossroads Presbyterian Church here in Monroeville. And if I look uncomfortable, it's because I have a little girl in my belly that is kicking the heck out of me right now. I am Presbyterian Church USA. I'm going to be trying to address also like what most Protestants might think about this, but the range of Protestantism is pretty large. So just know that I'm a Presbyterian. I'm also gonna just openly admit to being a millennial. And so my perspective might be a little, I am still a geriatric millennial. I'm old enough to be like on the tail end, but I'm sure that my perspective will be just a little bit different. As I reflected on this, the question for me was twofold. Is God relevant and is religion relevant? As Protestants, we would naturally separate the ideas of God and religion. Religion, or the institutional church by definition, is a collection of humans reacting or responding to their experience of God. Therefore, the church is fallible, able to make mistakes and cause harms to others. And this is a popular thought among Protestants today. The Episcopal priest Barbara Brown Taylor is quoted as saying, "The only clear line I draw these days is this: when my religion tries to come between me and my neighbor, I will choose my neighbor. Jesus never commanded me to love my religion." So I think that's a very common thing you would hear among Protestants. Protestants, and especially Presbyterians by definition, believe that the church is meant to change and grow as it responds to God. God, on the other hand, is uniquely sovereign. The sovereignty of God was one of the great themes or motifs of the Reformation in the 1500s. We particularly as Presbyterians trace our heritage back to John Calvin and John Knox, who eventually gave birth to the Presbyterian Church in Scotland, which eventually becomes Presbyterian Church USA over here, or brings that over to the United States. They held strongly to the belief that God was in control. God alone was divine and worthy of praise, and that God was actively involved in the lives of all people, not just the ordered ministries. They believed that all people had access to the divine through prayer. And because, as Kendra Laura said, humanity is made in God's own image, Presbyterians and most Protestants would believe that God desires relationship with each person and that all individuals have immediate access to God. Because of that sovereignty of God and the desire of God to have a relationship with creation, Protestants would say God is relevant today. Furthermore, in my own opinion, especially with the rise of statements like "I'm spiritual but not religious," all humans have some sort of spiritual longing. How it is expressed, I believe, comes out in a variety of ways, mostly by, the culture and environment in which a person was raised, or perhaps traumatic or challenging experiences within the life of a religious institution. I believe that God is big enough to transcend all of the problems with a religious experience in the world. And I believe that God uniquely understands the needs of all people, meeting them where they are. I believe that even in the midst of the challenges of fallible human experience, we all long in a unique way for the one who created us. And we all long for spiritual meaning in this life, to know that we are connected to each other and to something bigger than ourselves. Protestants happen to call that God. And so I believe God is relevant today. On the other side of the coin about religion, one of the great mantras of the Reformation in the 1500s, and I have to use the Latin that everyone told me I would never get to use, was Reforma et semper reformanda, which in Latin means the church is reformed and always being reformed. Or we would say that the church is reformed and always in need of being reformed by the Spirit of God. In the 1500s, when the Protestant Reformation began, it came first as a reaction to people with power in the church acting in a corrupt way. Not everybody, but some people. And by charging, there were things like charging money to have sins forgiven. So people in the 1500s experienced religious trauma at the hands of those in power. And therefore the reformers protested that the church was still subject to the judgment of God and needed to be held accountable for its actions. The early Protestant denominations, Lutherans, Presbyterians, and Methodists, set up checks and balances to make sure that those in power could not use that power for harm. Over time, they have, shockingly, and from the very beginning of the Reformation with Henry VIII. And as denominations settle into patterns, naturally humanity continues to not be great to each other. And so the old adage remains true: the church is reformed, but always in need of being reformed. And so as a Presbyterian, I believe that the church, and I say that, in reference to the Christian church in particular, is in need of a reformation today. I believe that the relevance of religion has to do with being accessible to people, being subject to change as we learn new things about God, human nature, or our governing systems. Anecdotally, as a millennial, I know a lot of people who are not interested in religion these days and who find it irrelevant to their lives. And one of the primary reasons that I hear over and over again is because of some sort of religious trauma in their lives. Whether it was something really simple, like the church didn't understand, the kind of music they liked, or they came to church and a member said, sorry, but that's my seat, and had them move, or perhaps it's something really significant, like someone is told that they're going to hell because of who they love or how they express who they are. These traumatic experiences are contagious. When we hear about some way that a person was treated by a religious institution, even personally, when I hear about people in the Hindu faith being treated poorly by my religious siblings, right? That hurts me. That is religious trauma that we feel indignant and frustrated and upset on their behalf. But the church as an institution, and I speak specifically about the Presbyterian Church USA, rarely accepts blame for the things that we've done wrong. And we often try to brush the pain of others under the rug. Now, I believe in the Protestant faith, our churches can only remain relevant by learning to adapt and change. There's a great theologian, Phyllis Tickle, who says that every 500 years the church has to go through a reformation. And so I believe we're there. And I believe that, the church has never looked the same over all of the years. No time period is any better or worse than any other. And so people have adapted, and that is the same is true today. The church of tomorrow or religion of tomorrow might look really different, but it can remain relevant by hearing the deepest concerns of the people who have been harmed or disenchanted by the church's teachings, in particular because they bear the image of God, that they are part of our co-creation. And so in the end, there are things obviously that I think as a Presbyterian we can't compromise, but there is an abundance of ways that we could make room for at the table for everyone. So.
My name is Mary Ann Jew. I am a member and commissioned lay minister at the Unitarian Universalist Church that's located in Murraysville. So I'm next door neighbors. And the question about religion and relevance, I will address from the perspective of a Unitarian Universalist. Many of the Unitarian Universalists that I've met, so I became UU about 21 years ago, we're in a lay-led congregation, primarily lay-led. So I think many of us would say we are spiritual but not religious. In fact, I gave a presentation, central message was about that word religion, because there are UUs who, and that stands for Unitarian Universalist, which is a really long name, who they'll bristle at that term. And I presented that that there's one root meaning about religion, meaning to bind together. So while, and let me back up and say a little bit that I think maybe is distinct about Unitarian Universalism. This tradition came together when Unitarians and Universalists joined together in the 1950s. So the two denominations were declining in numbers, and they chose to come together, and they had to try to find a way to bring their beliefs into one setting. So Unitarians come from the root that says, as opposed to Trinity, there's unity, and the Universalists believed in universal salvation. But in the years that followed, and again, I only became a Unitarian Universalist in the early 2000s, the scope and the attitude is quite broad. So I just want to share a couple of things to try to share a little idea of what is this faith, because also some people get confused and think that we are another group that has a similar name, and we are not that group. So one distinction is that Unitarian Universalists have a strong support for and belief in pluralism. We are actually required in our bylaws to revisit our definition of ourselves every 15 years. So speaking to this idea of reforming, it is actually mandated as part of our denomination. So this is one of the proposed values for our next, we'll be voting in June. It's on pluralism. We celebrate that we are all sacred beings, diverse in culture, experience, and theology. We covenant to learn from one another in our free and responsible search for truth and meaning. We embrace our differences and commonalities with love, curiosity, and respect. So you will find people who are in UU denomination congregations who will identify strongly with Buddhist practices, with some with Christian practices, and just the gamut. So I just try to share that, because again, sometimes we just I leap in or we talk and people aren't sure what UUs are. Again, we come from a Christian tradition, but I would say, and I'm not speaking, at the high level, but UUs in general, you cannot assume a UU is identifying as Christian. That would be, you would be possibly mistaken. All right. So from our inspiration section, again, this is what's proposed, that it reflects a lot of who we are now. Direct experiences of transcending mystery and wonder are primary sources for Unitarian Universalist inspiration. These experiences open our hearts, renew our spirits, and transform our lives. We draw upon and are inspired by sacred, secular, and scientific understandings that help us make meaning and live into our values. These sources ground us and sustain us in ordinary, difficult, and joyous times. We respect the histories, contexts, and cultures in which these sources were created and are currently practiced. Grateful for the experiences that move us, aware of the religious ancestries we inherit, and enlivened by the diversity which enriches our faith, we are called to ever deepen and expand our wisdom. So again, just to try to set the setting, there are about a little under, I think, 1,000 congregations now in the UU denomination. I would say about half of those are lay-led. So the structure of this is not necessarily top-down. It's very flat. It's very congregational, the way we run our congregations. And addressing this question of, is religion relevant? Religion, I think, to UUs it is a place if you seek community in your search for truth and meaning, because I'm sharing this. My younger son went through the religious ed program as a UU, and he does not currently attend any UU groups. And I said, well, why don't you do that? And he said, because I feel comfortable in my search and what I found for truth and meaning. And I said, well, that's great, but there, I hope will come a time, or may come a time, when you actually want some community for that. You'll want to talk to someone about your ideas, and the fact that what's important to you spiritually is a blend of from different faith traditions, and you may not be able to find that if you go to a specific traditional faith. Or maybe like I did, when you have kids, you'll find this a very warm and welcoming and open home. So my sense is that Unitarian Universalism as a denomination is really trying hard to move into present day, and it is painful. We have congregations that are really struggling with the changes that have been proposed, the way they're worded. It's been very interesting to be a part of this faith tradition at this time, to see what has come out in people. Because again, UUs tend to talk and to think as if we're very open. Welcoming congregations are very, very common. This is open, very supportive and open for LGBTQ plus individuals. UUs tend to be very sensitive about the pronouns and using the correct pronouns for people, including trying to not use no offense, but and as you said it's the language, and they're very concerned, maybe some might say too concerned about the language and how it's worded. So I think the relevance again is really for UUs is really tied to, are there people still seeking to be in community with one another on this journey? And I think that will be very revealing over the next 10 to 20 years, is whether the denomination has held its membership, but it has not grown. So it'll be interesting to see. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jason Bippen. I am the Imam and Religious Director at MCCGP, otherwise known as the Muslim Community Center of Greater Pittsburgh. And when we talk about this question of is religion relevant today, we have to follow rule number one of any dialogue or debate, and that is to define our terms. What do we mean by religion, and what do we mean by relevance? And for religion, it's defined in various ways. Some define it as that which binds. However, gangs also bind their members together, but we wouldn't call gangs religions. Religion is also defined as that which concerns the proper performance of rites and rituals. Now, in the Islamic religion, we have the Arabic language as a liturgical language because it's the language of our sacred scripture, the Quran. And the word, or the closest word in Arabic used in the Quran for what we would call religion is the word deen. And deen doesn't really translate evenly into religion. Deen literally means a life transaction or a way of life that is divinely revealed, given to the prophets and messengers that God sent across humanity. So that deen, or that way of life, is really the life transaction that you have with God and the transaction you have with other human beings. But when people talk about religion today, it can mean all sorts of things. You know, for some people, religion is just what they were born into. They are Christian, or they are Jewish, or they are Hindu by accident of birth. Had they been born into another family, they would have been a different religion. For some people, religion is just what they don't eat, right? For some people, religion is defined by what holidays they celebrate or don't celebrate. And there's not much more to it. Meaning, for them, religion is a carryover from the broader culture they grew up in. It's not defined by any real theology or metaphysics of belief regarding the divine. It's just a carryover of the greater culture they were born into, right? So when we look at religion more broadly, not just from the Islamic perspective, but more broadly, we can see that there's actually 5 functions of religion. And if religion is to be relevant, then these 5 functions need to be operating within the people. You have transmission, translation, transaction, transformation, and most importantly, transcendence. These are the 5 functions of religion. So transmission is imparting that sense of identity through shared customs, rituals, sacred stories, a worldview that gives historical continuity, where you feel connected to something greater than yourself. That is the transmission aspect of religion. Then you have translation. And translation is that which helps you to interpret life and acquire meaning and make sense of your relationship to the whole. And this is done socially, meaning how you relate to the world around you. Also cosmically, how do you relate to the transcendent? How do you relate to the divine, to the greater questions of the universe, such as who am I? Why am I here? What is my purpose of existence? Is this all there is? These are the greater questions. So that's transmitted in the translation aspect of religion. The third aspect of religion, or the third function, is transaction. And transaction is that which creates and sustains healthy communities of believers, what provides guidelines and ethics for interacting with families, with husbands and wives, with communities, and with broader society. How do you deal with people? How do you buy and sell? How do you guard your tongue? And when you speak about people or to people, ethical guidelines are covered in this function of religion. The transaction, how do I eat? How do I sleep? What guides my actions? Is it just habit? Is it just what everyone else is doing in society? Do I just go with the flow? Or is it guided by a higher ethic? That is a function of religion. The fourth function of religion is transformation. And this is fostering spiritual development and nurturing so people can grow in closeness to the divine and acquire healing, maturity, and something that if they implement and live in their life, they will find their life is improved. Their character will change for the better. They'll see that they're becoming a better person. They'll think, look how far I've come along in implementing these teachings, these beliefs, these practices, these ethics, these understandings of the nature of the world and the nature of my relationship with God. I am transformed as a person. I'm better than I used to be. And that's the transformation aspect of religion. The fifth function of religion is the most important, and that is transcendence. That is the ultimate goal of religion, transcendence, which is to give you an understanding of the ultimate reality, to give you an understanding of truth with a capital T, because we believe in truth with a capital T. We don't believe as Muslims that there's your truth and my truth. No, we believe that it is God's gift to humanity that they are able to discover truth, that they're able to arrive at truth. And if it was not possible for human beings to arrive at truth, then no one can make any claim about anything whatsoever, because water quenches thirst and it doesn't quench thirst. The fire is cold, the fire is hot. We couldn't make any truth claim if there's no absolute truth. So transcendence is experiencing the divine beauty as well as the rigor, not just intellectually, but experientially through transformation. So that is when religion takes you beyond the rituals. It takes you beyond the cultural things that you were born with and takes you to a higher understanding of who is God, what is the divine reality. And what we find in the world today is that people are searching for transcendence, but they're searching for it outside of religion. People have this innate desire to search for transcendence. And if they're not searching for transcendence in getting close to God, they search for transcendence in all sorts of other things, through substances, through addictions, addictive behaviors, through their carnal desires, through all sorts of things. Anything that can fill that quote unquote God-shaped hole in the heart is a search for transcendence. And this is the great challenge that we have in this day and age, in that not just speaking on behalf of Islam, but I think this is a phenomenon with every world religion, is that where those other functions are met more or less, transcendence is not often met, because people, they latch on to cultural forms of their religious practice, but this transcendence seems to be eluding them somehow. And when that becomes a problem, people search for it elsewhere, right? And this is the aspect of religion that has to be emphasized, I believe, in our religious institutions. This search for transcendence of knowing God Almighty, not just religion as a social club of my friends, not just something I was born into by accident of birth. And as I was saying, everyone has this God-shaped hole in their heart, for lack of a better term, and it has to be filled with something. If it's not filled with seeking the divine, it will be filled by something else. We will look for something else. And this could be an ideology, it could be drugs, it could even be a sports team, it could be a political party on all sides, where people take that as their quasi-religion. They define their existence by that thing. Whereas true religion is where you define yourself by your relationship to the divine, to the transcendent. So religion is defined in various ways, as we mentioned. What about relevance? The word relevant, I looked it up in the dictionary. In the Webster's dictionary, one of the definitions for relevant is appropriate for the current time. So the question I have is that, does God have to change for us, or do we have to change for God? One philosopher said, it is the nature of reality that it is man who submits to the divine, not the divine who submits to man. And as another thinker once said, the greatest threat to religion is not really atheism. It is apathy born of irrelevance. So there's a fine line between making concessions to make religion more accessible to our people and watering it down and changing it, where we become the God figure who determines what is guidance and what is not. So there is a fine line, and that should come out hopefully in our discussion. Thank you very much.
Excellent. So
I took 10 minutes, so yeah.
no, I'm the last one. And I'm glad that I am the last one. I didn't write any speech. I just wanted to share with you Sikh religion. That's where I come from. I don't even want to call it religion, actually. Sikhism is a way of life. And right from its start, principles or doctrines of Sikhism have been followed by people of other religions. And as they become stronger, they work together, pray together. So the followers of Sikh faith, if you will, or Sikh way of life came together. So at the outset, Sikhism cannot be separated from human way of living. So if I say something and say this is what we are supposed to do, and a Hindu will say, oh, it says in my book too, and Jews will say it is in mine too, and that's the way it's supposed to be anyhow. So the three doctrines of Sikhism are, first is internalize creator. Not just pray, not just recite name, but internalize creator. Know that there is only one creator that created everything that we can see or not see, feel or not feel, touch or not touch. Anything that is there is created by the same creator. What does that mean? Is that everyone sitting here is created by the same creator, so there is a kinship. So there is no enemy, and I don't have to be afraid of anyone. And nobody has to be afraid of me because there is kinship. Now, this is about human and animals and all being. Water, earth, air, also created by the same creator. I'm created by the same creator, so I have that sense of responsibility. The stewardship towards the air, the water, the earth. So my actions need to be in line with that if I have internalized the creator. So that's the first rule. And I'll make it brief. Second rule or second doctrine is to make our living we need to be working as a steward. So when we are making our living, in doing so, we should not be hurting anyone or damaging any environment. And I won't elaborate on it, we can talk a lot about it. Third doctrine is to share with others. In Sikh religion or Sikh followers do not do charity. Because if we do charity, then we feel good about it. We feel proud about it. We are not supposed to. So charity is not the thing. You are giving it to your brothers and sisters who may need it. So you are sharing, and what you are giving has been gifted to you by somebody else, by the same creator. So if we live by, and we can elaborate to encompass almost everything that we are talking about. So essentially, Sikhism is a way of life, 3 doctrines, and if we live by it, why it is relevant for me? I'm a software engineer, I'm a trustee at Gurudwara, and I'm a member of MIM and many other things. But at the core, what I do comes from the teachings of Sikhism. Therefore, religion to me is relevant to run my own life. Any aspect of my work, my day, is governed by and is relevant. The religion is relevant in every aspect of my life. So it is very relevant. Thank you.
All right, thank you, members of the panel. Before we move to the audience, we don't have to take the full 15 minutes, but, and we won't take any more than that, but are there members, oh yeah, Singh does need to leave. Thank you very much. Are there any questions, observations, or comments that any member of the panel would like to make in relationship to what someone else said or not?
I would want to say, I think it's obvious that we all agree.
Yeah.
We have different traditions, we have different backgrounds, we have different beliefs. We all agree on the role that our beliefs play in making our lives better and trying to make the lives of other people better. And that's really what I think we all think is the purpose of what we do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right, obviously, everyone on the panel thinks religion is relevant. Everyone in the audience may not share that perspective. So recognizing both the uniqueness, the commonality, as well as the diversity, maybe if there are no objections, we will move to questions, comments, and observations from the audience. And following the format we did before, we'll begin with those of you gathered here for a statement, and then we'll go with those joining us on Zoom and alternate back and forth. So anyone in the audience have question, comment? You may direct a question to an individual member of the panel or just have a general question at your own discretion.
First of all, I want to thank everybody because I'm from a Christian faith, but it's really interesting hearing all the perspectives. Like you said, seeing where everybody really does jive is wonderful. But my question has to do with, I think religion is relevant, obviously the panel does, but how do we convince the younger generation that it is? Like, you say these beautiful things, but some of us aren't as eloquent with it. How do you convince your kids and the younger people in society? Like, it feels like so many are leaving organized religion and saying exactly that. Like, I'm spiritual, but I'm not religious, but there's no model, there's no framework for them. How do we convince them?
Panel?
I'll try that one.
Okay.
And I'll try to answer your question, not just as a Muslim, but in a general way. There's a number of ways we can approach that. In my opinion, the best way to inculcate religion among children is to show them that it works. If they don't see that it works in the household, because children, especially as they go into their early adolescence and teenage years, They have a very uncanny ability to sniff out hypocrisy, and they will see it a mile away. So that implies that we are actually practicing our religion, not just on holidays, not just one day a week, but through how we interact with them, our spouses, and with everyone else. But without shoving it down their throat at the same time. But that also implies that we know our religion. That implies that we are studying our faith, that we're seeking those 5 elements I was speaking about earlier: the transaction, the translation, the transmission, and ultimately transcendence, right? And if children see that religion works, it's not being shoved down their throat, but you know what you're talking about, and you're able to guide their questions. See, a lot of times what happens with me, I'm an imam, so what happens is you get a lot of different parents from the community at various levels of religiosity and education. Sometimes their kids, because the kids are out in the world, they're hearing all sorts of stuff, they come home with questions, and the parents don't know how to answer the questions. And these are basic questions that those parents should have already known. For example, if God created everything, who created God? For a lot of people, that stumps them. That's not a stumping question if you know your theology. I don't care, at least in the Abrahamic traditions, if you know your theology, that's really simple. You have to define God, right? So you got to know those things. You got to arm yourself with that knowledge so that you can answer those life questions. But what happens to a lot of parents is when they get those questions, they don't know how to answer them, and they feel threatened by the question, and they tell, oh, go ask the pastor, go ask the imam, or go do something else or whatever. And that shows the child, oh, so there is no answer, right? And then they go on a different path. So those are just a few points.
I'd be happy to take that too. I think that the question itself makes me wonder why we as religious leaders feel an urgency to convince the younger generation. Most of us who experience religion as relevant in our lives have had some sort of transcendent experience, some sort of experience with the divine. And I think as somebody whose family is not religious at all, if I spent a lot of time trying to convince them of religion, it would break our relationship and probably not work. And a lot of times I think that younger people just need that experience, and they also need authenticity. I believe that while they're attracted to the show, when it's not authentic, they're going to go the other direction. And so being honest about the ways that religion is meaningful to us, but also the ways that, sometimes it has come up short, that we're looking for ways to grow and change, I think is important in helping younger people connect with that authenticity of who God is.
I mentioned earlier about the study that I actually just saw a couple hours before this panel. One of the things that it talks about, though, is that the level of Americans who have no religious affiliation has gone above 50%. And that kind of tells you, the message is not getting out. Look around the crowd. There aren't many young people here. And a lot of it is, I said, no, I didn't say there were none.
And the attendance is generally lower than a penguin.
Kind of raises the question. There are other influences that younger people are coming from. And Catherine Laura talked about science. Everybody says, science is the answer. Well, science doesn't answer everything. I read a fabulous book one time. It says, I do not have enough faith to be an atheist. Because if you look at what would be required for everything to just fall into place, it's like, really? I believe that somebody did all that, and you believe it just happened? But part of the problem is trying to make that message to the younger people who really don't want to have time for it.
Corey, do we have a question from anyone on Zoom?
We do not have anything at the moment, but if anybody would like to unmute themselves, Judy, would you like to ask a question? You are muted right now.
I'm sorry. Yeah, it's not so much a question. It's often I hear people say, oh, religion causes wars and religion is not good because it causes all this, conflict in the world. And in reality, it's not the religions themselves. It's the people selectively interpreting the religion and using religion as an excuse for their own ends and, to justify whatever their own agenda is. And I guess it's something, I think maybe a lot of young people would say, oh, religion is not good because we have all these wars and it's caused by religion. But I guess that's my comment.
All right,
Good observation, thank you.
thank you for that comment. Someone else from,
I just wanted to,
Yeah.
I wanted to thank you for that comment because that comment is so critical for me personally to keep reminding myself about whether it's a faith tradition group or whether it's a marginalized group or just a group that I don't know well. It is so critical for me to keep remembering and learning that lesson over and over again, that it is incorrect for me to make an assumption. I mean, I'll tell you, just it's so easy to do that, even when you think you're being strong and good. I just want to hold that up because those are the thoughts that lead to so much pain. That's why people beat up other people that they don't even know. It's because they've made an assumption about them and identify them with some sort of group or characteristic, and they have not internalized what you just said, Judy. So just holding that up. Thank you.
thank you.
I just wanted to add something that to you. I think about that a lot. And actually, because of something Lindsay said in the meeting about, we were talking about this subject and what we're going to do and about what religion has done throughout history. And I think about myself as an African American, and I think about how Christianity held up slavery. I mean, used religion. But somehow that never entered into my thoughts about worshiping God and about following religion. Somehow it always in my mind that was people, not God. That's the difference. That's people, not God.
I'm gonna add to this as well. We often hear this as clergy, this idea that, oh, religion, it causes violence all across the world. Historically, it's always been a force of evil and violence. I think if you tally up the numbers, you can say that irreligion and irreligious ideologies have actually caused more bloodshed historically. The greatest bloodshed in human history occurred from World War I through World War II and communist China, and like so many atrocities that were committed in the name, not of religion, not of any God, but in the name of secular ideologies. And to segue from that, the greatest argument that religion is relevant is the fact that people who are anti-religion can't stop talking about religion. If it was irrelevant, no one would care. And the fact that they care and want to argue proves to you that religion is still relevant.
I had an atheist friend tell me that once. He said, I probably think about God more than you do.
Yeah.
All right, another question or comment from the audience? Yes.
This is lovely, and I thank you all. Why can't we? Is it people?
Can't we?
Large groups of people are working.
Large it up. Here we are getting along, talking about religion. Why can't we do
Out
that
there.
out in the world?
Outside the room.
Where do we fall down?
A lot of us become, society thinks that if you're talking about religion, you're trying to beat them over the head with something. Okay.
Convert.
And what Yvonne said is very important, as actually what Seek was saying as well, or Singh was saying as well. It is necessary to live your religion, and that's the best way to present it, not standing on a street corner preaching. St. Francis of Assisi is famous for saying, there's a story that St. Francis and Brother Juniper are walking around, and Brother Juniper wants St. Francis to teach him to preach. And so they go out and they help a woman carry her groceries home. They help somebody do this, they help somebody do that. And Brother Juniper says, well, Brother Francis, why don't you teach me to preach? He says, well, we are. It's how we live that really preaches what we believe.
Yes, Karen.
Oh, that's one of the issues with Christianity right now, is that there are so many different ways to be a Christian and different ways to express yourself as a Christian. And if you're a Christian and believe that the only way to God is through Jesus, then you're going to lose a bunch of people, even if you live your best life. That's my struggle right now at 77. Oh my gosh, you know, what if I grew up in the church, and now I'm like, wow. I still believe in community. I, want to be with my neighbors, and I want to share my faith, but I do believe I live what God wants me to do. But I'm struggling with, what I grew up with.
I think for a long time religion, and I can mostly speak for the Christianity piece of it, has taught us how to be right. When I was growing up, we had to memorize a lot of stuff from the Bible. We did a lot of reciting it, and when I went to seminary, it was a lot of teaching me how to have right theology. And I think that when we really look at the essence of Christianity, it should be about how we love, not being right. I don't think there's ever a time in our tradition where Jesus says, well, you didn't get that answer right, so forget it. It's all about what we do. So, and while that's a very particular Jesus story, I think that is true across the board, that, while we might all think we have some right answers in all of this, at the end of the day, I think we're all very committed to doing what is loving.
When the question came out as what do we have a problem, or why don't we get along outside of this room? And when we leave this room, we go into the real world, where world has a power struggle, different group or people with a different figure, then social hierarchy, and distribution of wealth. Either it is getting a job or getting admission in colleges or any amount of wealth. If you look at the history, one country invades other country, quite often has been religion, but there are also wealth is one of the major reason too. And we know that. I mean, we hear about why do we go to Middle East, why, or whatever. But I'm just giving a name that this is a true phenomena when we go out of the room and that reality hits and we put the God in the back rather than up in the front. And that's where the problem, at least I think, comes out.
What I've heard in every single person on the panel is that God is love, and God, we're called to care for each other, to care for the earth, to embrace. So I embrace everybody that spoke tonight. I said, oh yeah, I want to be that. I want to be, I am that. I am everything everyone has said tonight. And then sometimes I think, well, am I just a humanist?
You don't have to put a label on it.
Right, yeah.
There you go. Thank you. But it's humanity, and I'm so concerned about the humanitarian disaster the world is in right now. We don't care for each other as humans. And our government is trying to help the world, but by killing people and being part of, our taxes are going, well, we could go on and on. And I am struggling, clearly struggling with what is happening in the world today. And I think we do need God. We need to turn to a power beyond our humanness and say, God's weeping as we destroy each other.
And thank you for sharing that struggle. Appreciate it.
And I hope that as the ministerium, I am proud and grateful to be a part of this ministerium. I don't have many colleagues throughout even the Pittsburgh area that have the unique gift and opportunity to serve on a ministerium like this. And I hope that little by little we do in our tiny corner of the universe in Monroeville and the surrounding regions sort of try to live that out even when it's not as visible or even if it's just here.
Corey, do we have another comment or question from the folks on Zoom?
I don't see anything in the chat at the moment. Let's see.
Okay, then we will, if something comes, let us know. Otherwise, we'll take another comment. We have about 10 more minutes. Yes.
So as a fellow millennial customer, who still occasionally tries to go to church, I have thought about this a lot. And I guess I've been working on a theory as I've watched other folks in my age bracket and around that area. I think we have a concern about being duped. I think being wrong about something is one of the worst things we can be. It's very embarrassing, almost shameful to realize that, like, oh, I got that fact wrong. Oh, everybody knows that. And I was thinking as we were talking, it seems weird to say this in our age of conspiracy theory, take your pick, but I think everybody's afraid of being duped in a way that I didn't realize, because if you believe a conspiracy theory, at least you have the certainty, like I see the truth and no one's gonna pull the wool over my eyes. So I guess I just it's a theory I've been thinking about for years, and I just wondered if anybody had any thoughts on like how that ties into what we're talking about.
In my theology class, I teach that when a person knows God, it is not what we call faith, as in faith defined as a kind of blind trust. Like, well, I'm just going to put my trust that God exists and that God is all powerful and all knowing. And maybe not, but I'm going to trust that it is. That's not what we call faith. We would call faith certainty. But it's not the certainty of a person who, okay, if you see the sun comes out, do you need to shout at people to tell them the sun is out? No, it's because it's so obvious. You have such certainty. The people who tend to shout the loudest about these things harbor in themselves a kind of insecurity. If I see the sun is out, I don't have to scream at people to convince them that it's out. I know it's out. So I know God is real. I know God is the absolute. So I have certainty in that. And that certainty, in Arabic, we call it bardul yaqeen. It's the coolness of certainty, right? So if you have certainty in God, then you build from there, right?
I wanted to say, as a millennial, that we have, in my generation, we've watched almost every year a major institution in our lives be shown for something that it is not. I grew up in the age of the Bill Clinton scandal, and so there's, I was in middle school when Columbine occurred, right? And so the safety of school was simply a misnomer. So throughout my whole lifetime, it has been one thing after another of these great institutions finding cracks. And so it is natural, I think, for us to say, where's the crack in the religious institution as well? And I think that's why I find myself most comfortable in the Presbyterian piece of that, because we live in cracks. That's what we do. So anyway, I think that's a big piece of that feeling of being duped is that, and then in our society today, it continues that we're trying to find these problems with the celebrities and whatever the heck is going on with the royal family. And so that these conspiracy theories are very, and I think a lot of times when people want, they're enticing, right? Because they give this absolute truth that we just haven't really had an opportunity to feel good about. And so it's hard in religion right now to feel like, to find that a way to say that doesn't feel like a conspiracy theory or a duping or a mask for something else.
I want to speak to the point of duping, because as a boomer, the technology and the media, the social media, has totally changed my perspective on a lot of things and has caused fear. I'm afraid to click on something because I've been warned it may look good. It may look like it's from this, but it might not be. And I'm like, how do you know it's not?
Yeah.
I mean, even the machine itself, the computer, you used to be able to turn it on and then turn it off. Now you don't really have to turn it off anymore. They say, just close it. I go, just close it and it'll rest. But it's working, it's doing something, you know, and I want to turn it off. See, that's probably part of my struggle right now, is that things used to be more absolute. I volunteer at a store and I was learning the cash register. Cash register. Yeah. There's like 4 ways to. Doesn't work one way, then you do it another way. You used to be able to.
I didn't touch anything.
Generations right now. Is that it's just. Yeah, and then every 6 months, the technology changes and the AI don't even get me started. I mean, that when I'm hearing about artificial intelligence, it's just so scary and whatever.
I actually would like to speak to, you know, I feel like these people, maybe because they're so afraid of all this stuff happening, they don't want to use their own brains. Like, yes, there needs to be more critical thinking. What you're saying about studying it, finding your own transcendence, finding your own meaning. Like, you're being guided by religious leaders, but you're supposed to be doing that work and doing that research. And it seems like everybody nowadays just wants it like fed to them, or they believe whatever the first thing shows up on TV, and then you say, well, you're afraid of being stupid. Those are the, you know, you've got this side saying this side. You have to watch all of them and you have to figure it out for yourself.
We used to do that.
Yeah.
We used to do it.
Because you didn't have it all just shoved in your face, you had to go look.
Yeah, you looked up in the dictionary, you know, and now I look it up on my phone and I have these wonderful dictionaries in my phone. You know, it's just amazing to me, and I think that's what's confusing for the children too.
And for those of you inclined to conspiracy theories, I have no idea what happened with our city.
It's the FBI. They figured out
Yeah,
what we were
right.
talking
It's
about.
it's obviously something I said. I said before, I didn't touch anything, but Susan.
I was just gonna say, one of the things I think I've come to realize, maybe as a boomer and a person of faith and everything, that to have faith and even to believe in anything, you have to, there's always a little doubt somewhere there. That's part of it. I don't think you can have it. I don't think you can have faith without that. At least that's my perspective, because that keeps you searching, that keeps you reading and studying and trying to understand and to translate that into your faith into your life and everything. So to me, there's always some doubt. You know, institutions, I mean, from my perspective, you know, but you have to go forward anyway, you know, you just do, you have to go forward.
That seems like a good benediction. When we have these panel discussions, our time comes to a close, but the questions endure, the struggle goes on, the search continues. And the journey is before us. So I would like to thank. the
Hi,
members
Jerry.
Okay, I'd like to thank the members of our panel. I'd like to thank all. I'd like to thank all of you who have joined us either in person or on Zoom. And we in the Monroeville Interfaith Ministerium try to model the sorts of experiences of transcendence, the concern for others, the desire for love, and the pursuit of justice. And so that will become part of our continuing work. And we invite those of you who may not see yourself as members to at least join with us in the effort to move forward and not just say with our lips, but with our lives, there is indeed a relevance to religion. Thank you. God bless and stay well.
Do you have